modify your schedule a bit for this. I appreciate your indulgence. I'm actually going to talk about something that our previous two witnesses have alluded to, and it goes down into the weeds of unit record data systems. So I realize we're going to get into some really painful territory here, but I hope that you would indulge me for a second. And to that end, to establish a little bit of bona fides of this, I too am a veteran in this part of education. Actually, my tenure overlapped only slightly with Mr. Evers. I served from 2001 until late 2005 in my role as Associate Deputy Secretary for Budget and Strategic Accountability, which is a nice way of saying deputy, but that sounds stupid, so nobody actually said that. And one of the areas I did was policy advice for the Deputy Secretary and the Secretary on a variety of topics and a full portfolio of the department's work. And one of the areas we had internal debates about is student record data systems. And Mr. Evers is exactly right about what transpired in the most recent administration and the gutting of FERPA requirements. But what I want to provide you is some context to that, and also some faith in what you as Ohio legislators have the power to do and have already done for our state. For a little context, Mr. Evers was leading the office that led to actually a revision of FERPA, which was later itself gutted by the more recent administration. But at the time, it represented an easing of FERPA requirements, an ability to act by researchers to access certain kinds of data under certain conditions. And while I was there in the earlier days before this happened, there was a large internal debate that went on. And there was the faction of people who internally were opposed to that, and those who were in favor of that loosening. In fact, Mr. Petrelli, who will testify later, his boss, Nina Reeves, who's head of the Office of Innovation, was actually one of the people in favor of the loosening that went on. And ultimately, the folks who were on my side, we lost. I give you that to give you some of my bona fides about student unit record data systems. I am very concerned about student privacy. To critique just a little bit of what we've heard, the 2002 passage of the federal law on unit record data systems, which was ultimately funded by the Obama administration, was actually a piece of language that was placed in a non-education bill. It was actually, I believe, in a science committee bill or science appropriation for purposes of creating a program that was never funded. It wasn't actually funded during the Bush administration. It was funded not during Race to the Top, in fact. It was funded with stimulus dollars. And it hasn't worked out quite as it was expected, because the idea was there was going to be these state data systems that were packed together. In the meantime, what had happened, in fact, was an effort by the second Bush Secretary, Margaret Spellings, to create a unit record data system. And that was shot down, frankly, through the help of Congress, and in fact, one of the more influential people who brought about stopping that was none other than John Boehner, who we can thank for that. But the folks who favored large data systems continued their efforts, and really there was not a major change in policy, at least philosophy, on the need to create data systems as it transitioned from the leadership of Secretary Spellings to Secretary Duncan. There was actually the major change was a willingness to use unilateral authority to make that change. I go through all that because it's important to understand that there are still barriers in place to prevent the access of data if the state so chooses. And one of the good things that you have in this state is that our state does not turn over this data. And in fact, under the requirements in our laws, you have to affirmatively permit that as a board to change the policies about how we're going to be permitting data. Now, you've heard a lot about the requirements of Common Core, participation in PARC, which is something that we as a state through the Department of Ed have assured the feds that we will do to obtain our waiver for ESEA. Money is the hook. To keep getting ESEA money, Title I, and the various support programs, you have to agree to apply by No Child Left Behind. But if you don't, the Obama administration granted waivers that are conditioned on doing other things. And among the other things that we've agreed to do is participate in PARC and change our standard system. We've done that, but the condition of turning over data and changing the rules is something that is encouraged. We will do our best efforts to do. But frankly, I'm not interested in expanding the reach of the feds to access data, or frankly, other researchers to access data as a state policymaker, and neither should you.